2017 and 18, hey, we're in 2018. We did vote to change our sources. We voted to change the second source, which reads, words and deeds of prophetic women and men. We changed it to words and deeds of prophetic people. A commendable change that reflects our values. Additionally, 2017 revisited the explicit call to fight systems of oppression when Black lives of UU, in the wake of the turmoil unleashed by accusations of a culture of white supremacy in our association, proposed an eighth principle, in which the association would affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and institutions. So that was proposed in 17. And that proposal came as yet another amendment to the first principle was being proposed that would change the phrase, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, to the inherent worth and dignity of every being. However, given the pertinence of the racist analysis of our association, the every being proposal the people behind it agreed to table a vote as the UUA board vowed to create a new study commission to review all the principles. So this history is fascinating, but why am I laying it out for you today? Well, it's so we know the lay of the land in our association and the rules of the game, and also given that there is somewhere, supposedly, a commission convened to make recommendations and amendments, the door is open right now to reimagine our principles. It is very likely that we as a congregation will soon be asked to consider a change. The study commission could recommend a change to any of the principles and sources and the preamble, or to none. They may add an eighth principle or more, or propose an entirely different form. I don't know, and I've tried to find out. And when I find out more, I'll let you know. But it's my prayer that if they are able to, they would vote piecemeal rather than all at once, so as to avoid throwing out babies with bathwaters as we saw in 2009. For there is one thing that I would like to insist on. I do want to amend the first principle. I believe it needs an amendment. It's not that I don't like it. I love it. I think it is a cornerstone of our faith, and I hope Eli remembers it. And I have based much of my theology, ethics, and behavior upon that principle. It is perhaps because of my intimacy with the first principle that I can also testify to its shortcomings and shadow side. We affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. It's good. It's life-saving. I've seen it save lives, but it's also incomplete, unreflective, and illogical. The only time that you need to know that you have irrevocable worth is when you feel worthless. There's nothing to do, really. It's only to acknowledge, I have worth. No one can take that away, not even me. Now, we could be in a really bad way, a mess, a wretch. And remembering that we have worth and that everyone here knows it can be a lifeline. Additionally, you can be, in a really bad way, a mess, a wretch, and if I remember that you have inherent worth, it will help me cut through the wretchedness and see the inherent preciousness. Now, this aspect of the first principle changes how we see ourselves and others. Now, it is true that the feeling of wretchedness can plague even the most privileged in our society, which by and large, as a tradition, is us. But generally speaking, as a people of privilege, we walk through the doors of our congregation already feeling pretty worthful. And while I wouldn't want the opposite to be true, it's worth acknowledging that our whole society has been built to cater to and to sustain our worth. All too often at the expense of others. Now, sometimes that is still not enough, and for when that is not enough, this part of the principle can be a real balm. It's important, and I don't mean to lessen it. But in a critical light, when the first principle is applied to ourselves, it can be seen as patting oneself on the back. Or it can simply become invisible for the fact that my entire existence has been confirming my worth from the get-go. As background and subject, it's white on white. Because it is not often necessary to the point of invisibility, my impression is that this principle is, more often than not, intended for those whom my particular demographic, straight, white, able-bodied male of enlightened politics, might mistakenly construe as the other. Those whose worth our whole society is not constructed to cater to and sustain. And thus, it is sometimes a reminder that even they have worth. A reminder perhaps to us, though I hope we do not need it, but more to the unenlightened non-UU world, that we UUs believe that all people have inherent worth. And this is a valuable declaration. It is also a patronizing one. In short, I suspect that when we refer to this principle, we are holding it up for someone else to see, more than for ourselves. And that may be altruism, and it may be in a spirit of self-sacrifice, but the line between altruism and patronizing is not always clear. Now, there is a rhetorical method that will clarify that line and steer us to the appropriate side, I believe, and that method is declaring that our skin is in the game. And I think I have a way to do that, and I'll get to it in a moment. But first, we need to talk about dignity. Unlike worth, which is a value, a trait, dignity is a characterization of behavior. As such, can dignity be inherent? And to my mind, the answer is no. But you do not need to agree with me on that to understand the shadow side of this principle. First of all, the word dignity derives from the Latin dignus, which means worthy. So at best, we're being redundant. Beyond that, while you may not agree with me that dignity is a behavior rather than a trait, you will agree that dignity is a trait that behavior can undo. You can, and likely have, do, and will act undignified. You cannot, however, act worthless. And when you do act undignified, because we do, I don't even need to think very hard about that. I could remember it quite recently. What then? What then of our inherent dignity? It's a double sin to act undignified, isn't it? To act undignified is sin number one, but to do so when you are affirmed to be imbued with inherent dignity is beyond the pale, right? I mean, it's here that we are tempted to use our covenant as a cudgel. Why aren't you acting with inherent dignity? The shadow side of the assertion of inherent dignity creates judgmentality. And in judgmentality, we cut ourselves off from one another, cut ourselves off from God, and short-circuit our ability to be self-reflective. Thus, we increase our reactivity and bind ourselves to systems of oppression. See, judgmentality is the assertion that you are over and above another. Where do you think oppression starts? Now, that said, I do like the inclusion of dignity in this principle, but not on its own. I like the insistence that worthy behavior, that is dignity, is born with us, but not on its own. It needs a helper, and it gets one. For worth and dignity are not our only inherent qualities. We are, quite clearly, inherently fallible, inherently flawed, innocent at birth, yes, but imperfect. We are not born corrupt, but we are born corruptible. And this is good. God is revealed more by engaging our flaws than flaunting our achievements. And that gets us back to this notion of dignity, this sense of godliness embodied. For inherent dignity to make sense, it needs a concomitant acknowledgement that we are fallible beings. That we will and do miss the mark as a matter of course, for we are not whole. We are sufficient, but we are not whole. Or maybe we are only whole when we acknowledge that we are not whole. Thank you. You agree, yes. See, he was saying, amen. Preach it. Indeed, it may well be through our inherent imperfection that our dignity is born. To find worth in the face of imperfection, to find ability in the face of disability, to find wholeness through its disappointment. This is dignity. And now, produced by the interplay of our grace-given worth with our natural fallibility, dignity truly is inherent. But not on its own. It needs that partner of fallibility. Thus, I believe that if we are to affirm and promote the idea that we have inherent worth and dignity, we must also affirm and promote the idea that each of us is flawed. And to do otherwise is ethically and theologically irresponsible. And it has a cost. And I bet you've seen it. Where insisting on our inherent dignity creates a reality of judgmentality, acknowledging our fallibility opens the door to mercy and forgiveness and reconciliation and evolution. It opens our eyes, and it puts our skin in the game. Because now we are talking about us. I believe acknowledging our fallibility and our principles will create a more powerful tradition, one truly capable of not just saving lives, but transforming lives, your lives. Too often, Unitarian Universalism is a faith that can be agreed with rather than practiced. We congratulate ourselves for our enlightened perspective at the cost of perspective. We cut ourselves off from the power of transformation when we settle for congratulation. And it is time for that to stop. Our faith is a newborn, no more. We're growing up. It is time we live into our potential. But that power is only accessed through responsible reflection, the responsible search. It is irresponsible to acknowledge our common grace without acknowledging our common fallibility. And given that the interplay of the two produces what dignity we have, given that the interplay between fallibility and grace produces the dignity that we have, we can be grateful for both. Let's encourage our faith tradition to take a step forward. Let's move forward through the ages. Congregation, if you would rise, embody your spirit, and join our final song today. Number 114, Forward Through the Ages.